So let's bow in, everybody. And welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course as we continue our way through the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma. We're covering chapters 58 and 59 tonight. John Tyler and Barry Cunningham are going to be doing the heavy lifting, as it were.
All righty.
Barry, do you want to lead off?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. So this is the last chapter in this section in this book on the truth of cessation, which is, as Philip said last week, is kind of the hopeful or good news part of the Four Noble Truths, that cessation of suffering is possible. So he starts out by saying, from the Hinayana point of view, cessation means being able to prevent problems or use them up. The Sanskrit word for cessation is nirodha, Tibetan it's gokpa, which means to stop. And he pointed out that commonly gokpa is also used to indicate like nirvana, or the end of the path. But here in the Hinayana, shamatha meditation is our focus. It simply means to stop suffering, stop producing karma, and stop the suffering we bring to others. And how? Well, this is what we come back to again and again. The key is waking up, to stop our neurosis, our endless preoccupation with thoughts of self-improvement that inevitably immerse us in samsara and suffering. But cessation, gokpa, is different from nirvana. This is not the goal. First of all, here in the Hinayana stage of the path, it is the cessation of our individual suffering. Nirvana is much larger than that. And even at our level, it is incomplete, this cessation. He says it simply means that temporarily problems have been prevented. We've been able to cut through them. And having cut through unnecessary garbage, we are unable to develop real living sanity and to let that shine through. I mean, even at this level, what a relief to be free of the anxiety of trying to achieve this, avoid that, and then start to experience this ever-changing, vivid display of open awareness with all of its warmth and beauty and precision. But, he says, the level of hassle still remains. This is not nirvana. Gokpa, he says, has the quality of a vaccination. Once the problems are prevented, it is for good. Cessation means that we are actually able to prevent karma or karmic chains of reactions, as well as karmic consequences on the spot. So when we're awake, we're really fully present. We're able to just cut through this. And with cessation, to whatever degree and for however long, there is no new karma being generated. And we are also able to not perpetuate karma from the past. We don't reify the old argument, call that old boyfriend or girlfriend, or send that email, or tell that person off. At those times, when we have cut through the neurotic wheel spinning, we can meet the fruit of past karma without making a bigger mess. You have to pardon me if I'm looking around a bit. I just had cataract surgery over here, so But bear with me, I'm here. So in that sense, it's like a vaccination. When we're exposed to that bug again, we don't get sick. He says we begin to feel that we can prevent such problems by being highly disciplined and by having a genuine connection with our own mind and thought patterns, which could be good or bad or otherwise. By having a genuine connection with our thought patterns, it's not, they're not bad. We're not trying to banish them, but have a genuine connection with them, seeing them for what they are. There's no good thoughts, bad thoughts. It's all just mental activity. Now he says, oops, wait a second. So, of course, this takes practice, shamatha meditation practice. And with practice, we can begin to just drop the whole business of chasing after our desires and running away from our aversions. It's like chasing our own tail, you might say. He says, as far as shamatha practice is concerned, the way to do so is by non-participation in the samsaric world. Non-participation. The logic is that when you are meditating, you are actually boycotting the process of furthering anything at all. And he says that this is actually kind of simplistic logic, but every hour spent meditating is an hour when no new karma is being created. And to the extent that we're being mindful in our daily life, the same thing applies there. Now, cessation is not all or nothing. There are various degrees of cessation, he says. There could be lesser, medium, or greater degrees. So, but don't get hung up on looking for that big moment, Lord. Boom, free at last. Like all of a sudden there's a sudden flight. That can happen, I suppose. But for most of us, it's a process. And what is going to follow in this chapter is actually detailing that process, that progress. So, in simple sitting meditation, there's a degree of cessation. To the extent that we extend mindfulness into our daily life, cessation begins to occur there too. And we may develop confidence. This is because we understand how cessation works, we begin to feel that we are actually making progress. We develop a sense of friendliness, ease, self-respect. We have fewer complaints, less resentments. Those very simple things are signs of nirodha, or cessation. But, as usual, don't get hung up on progress. That can just turn the whole thing into a self-improvement project. He says you don't need confirmation or reassurance, you just keep going. Looking for reassurance would be returning to Kanjang, the origin of suffering. Kanjang, this term we covered in previous chapters here, but it is the origin of suffering. So once you have realized the truth of suffering and the origin of suffering fully and properly, you never make the same mistake again. This happens by instinct, he's saying this, as well as studying and practicing. That when we have a true understanding of the nature of our own discursive thoughts and how they produce kleshas that trap us in samsara, and we are then able to cut through them, things change. When we can see the habitual patterns of thoughts and emotions, see them as mental events, things change. It's like you just can't take them so seriously anymore. I mean, stuff still comes up, and you may begin to fall into a story, but you can sense that there's something fishy there. Like, oh, it's you again, that old story, and let it go. Sort of like a vaccination. So your thoughts lose the ability to hook you. You see through them. You see them for what they are, thoughts. Wait a second. Here we go. So experientially, cessation means that thoughts become transparent. And I just love thinking of it in that way. Thoughts become transparent. You just see them, they lose their solidity, their importance. Now, he is talking about sitting practice here, by the way. Thoughts are no longer a big hassle in sitting practice, he said. Thoughts still occur, feelings still come up. Little thoughts, he calls these punctuations, and sometimes powerful thoughts, strong feelings. But all of those thoughts, he says, are seen to be transparent rather than solid. Cessation occurs when there is no implication behind such thoughts. They're just ripples in the pond. There is no implication behind such thoughts. They don't need to be pursued. So now he talks about the 12 aspects of cessation, and I certainly read this as stages, seems to me. Number one is, oh, by the way, because he mentions this, that this is something that he got from the Treasury of Knowledge by Jogmung Khantrul the Great, who was his guru, was a reincarnation of Jogmung Khantrul the Great, who wrote this monumental thing called the Treasury of Knowledge. And I've been told that Jogam Trungpa, before doing presentations, would frequently refer to this when preparing. So anyway, so number one is nature, which has three categories. First is the origin, meditative absorption, which is shamatha discipline. It's what we've been talking about by coming back from thoughts and dreams over and over. The nature of our preoccupations become clearer and clearer. You can begin to understand the nature of reality by developing meditative absorption through the practice of shamatha discipline, which reduces kleshas. Reduces kleshas because you stop acting on all those thoughts based on me, what I need to do, don't want to do, acting out our passion, aggression, all of that. It's like sleepwalking and knocking things over as opposed to being awake in the world. Anyway, number two, the second category of nature is what should be given up, neurosis. What should be given up, overlooked, or transcended as neurosis. Through mindfulness and awareness, you experience the possibility of not committing yourself to the kleshas. Not committing yourself to the kleshas. You see, this is about changing our allegiance, committing ourselves to the Dharma instead of the endless pursuit of whatever. We've seen enough to never want to go back there again. That samsaric realm of anxiety, resentment. He says you're beginning to develop a sense of goodness and toughness, which automatically prevents you from getting sloppy. Number three is what should be cultivated, simplicity. Ultimately, awareness of the present moment, which is utterly simple. it is our habitual patterns of thought that are complicated. Shamatha meditation is so simple, just being completely here now. Not easy, but simple. He talks also about simplifying our life as an expression of this simplicity and as a way to deepen our practice and extend it. Simplicity, he says, means that you keep everything to a minimum. You keep your life very simple. And he says you could get up, practice, eat breakfast, go to work, come back, have dinner, practice again, go to sleep. But in general, simplifying your life, like just not doing really frivolous stuff so much. It's so easy to turn to some sort of entertainment here and there. So, just a moment. So, oh yes. Having overcome or seen through, wait a minute. Yes. Okay, sorry. Having overcome or seen through the temporary obstacles or veils that prevent us from seeing things as they are, seeing properly with clear vision, there are no further difficulties. So, again, this is the simplicity of coming back to the present moment, that we're no longer hooked by mental events and further difficulties in our life because we're no longer creating karma. Fundamentally, he says, the nature of cessation is based on a pure state of mind. A pure state of mind, not cluttered. A state of mind that is unencumbered by passion, confusion. Having overcome our inability to relate with our own basic nature, nothing needs to be prevented and nothing needs to be cultivated. The obstacles covering our basic sanity are not regarded as hardened. You see this? Well, we're going to talk about that later also, but the obstacles covering our basic sanity are not regarded as hardened. Everything becomes workable. So that's nature. The second thing is profundity. Profundity, he says, means developing subtleness in your attitude towards cessation. Understanding that cessation is nobody's property. It's part of you, and at the same time, seemingly, it is not part of you. It's part of you because the experience comes from your naturally awakened state. The basic sanity that exists as part of our state of being. It's not part of you because there is no you or I ultimately in the experience of cessation. When you come back to your basic sanity, everything is there. You're awake. And it is part of you because the development of Gogpa, of cessation, can only come from practice. And that can only come from your own inspiration. And it is not part of you because the practice itself comes from the Dharma, the wisdom of the lineage that we have all received. The simplicity of practice, he says, can be developed with respect to the tradition and discipline, and your intuition can be developed according to your own basic understanding of life. That is the point of profundity. The third thing is sign. Now, here we begin to see evidence of Nirodha, the signs that you are becoming a dharmic person, you might say. The sign that you have achieved cessation or Gogpa is that the kleshas have begun to subside. That little by little, you find that they generally cease to exist. I mean, you may notice that you're just not get carried away emotionally the way you used to, or you may begin to see changes in your relationships. These are signs of nirodha, of cessation. Because of your practice, you cease to play games and you become a decent person, he says. And eventually, the ultimate sign is realizing that that there are no more hang-ups of any kind. At that point, you have achieved nirodha and begun to experience nirvana. Now, I do get a bit confused here sometimes because he has said explicitly that this is not nirvana. But what this simply means is that in these moments when you are able to really experience the cessation of that, that is a moment of kind of enlightenment, of lightness. You're relieved of suffering. So nirvana means the freedom from suffering altogether. But this is not floating on a cloud of pleasure, immune to the vicissitudes of normal life. And he makes that point here, saying that you are becoming highly disciplined, you are realistic, proper, industrious, you have self-discipline, and you project dignity. Such ordinary decency is recognized as a token of cessation. Now, the fourth topic is ultimate. It is based on applying the understanding and discipline of prajna or knowledge in our approach to life. And through prajna, we develop a real understanding of where the confusion and chaos take place. And ultimately, you begin to develop what he calls noble prajna, which this is the intelligence that transcends normal intellect. It is the natural intelligence that inhabits open awareness, that is part of our basic nature, and it is intuitive. It is knowing. It's clear. It's effortless. You're simply awake and seeing clearly. Confusion is gone, and your actions are no longer generating karma. He says, in the experience of prajna, you know what to do and how to do it properly and fully. Through intellect, you're able to overcome what should be avoided, the seed or origin of suffering. Leave it at that. Number 5, incompletion. So, at this point, you understand that although you have overcome problems and obstacles, he says, you have not yet blossomed. So, after the ultimate, in which you have developed prajna and confidence in your understanding and in your ability to see things as they are using prajna, you begin to see that there are more stages ahead of you. And at this point, you have become what he calls a stream winner, which I have no idea what the etymology of that is. But he says that you have overcome the hangups against seeing clearly, but once you join the path of clear seeing, or seeing things as they are, you find that along with that, there are further hangups. So this is a stream winner. It's someone who has progressed to this point where they have this development of prajna and confidence in being able to see things for what they are. This is another breakdown of another list, which I didn't make clear, but with the fifth one of these stages or topics in completion, there are 3 topics under there, stream winner, and then once returner. There are also students, he says, who have reached the level known as once returner, meaning that you only return to the world one more lifetime. You do not keep returning due to karmic debts. Now, I will just say here that, of course, a lot of these teachings are very much in terms of everyone going through many lifetimes. At the end of this life, you are reborn into a future life, and there are many preceding years. But it can also be seen as the birth and death of periods of your lifetime, or of moments, or of a relationship, or whatever. So, in each one of these periods, you may be creating karma, maybe not. You may be dealing with past karma, maybe not. So that's how I interpret this. So that although you may have cleaned up your act and you're not creating any new karma, you will be confronted by the fruits of past karma. You see, this is a once returner. And at that stage, you should be able to meet these situations and relate to them directly, openly, and with compassion. And then we have non-returners. Finally, you're no longer returning to the world of samsara. You are no longer subject to past karma, but you're not quite there yet. He says, the attainment of Gotpa is still incomplete or temporary. All such students are partially delivered and partially confused. So these are the signs of cessation. Now, number 6, signs of completion. This is a point of further development. At this point, you become an arhat. And an arhat is the ultimate development of the Hinayana stage of the path. Excuse me. Someone who has, he says, someone who has completely overcome or controlled any obstacles to the path. Your learning is completely accomplished, and you have reached a state of non-learning. So, meaning that you do not need to keep studying it, thinking about it, working on it. You simply know it. It has become natural, effortless. You maintain your meditative, it has become effortless to maintain your meditative absorption. You have finally developed complete confidence in that. However, he says, this state of no more learning refers purely to the arhats on the Hinayana level rather than the Bodhisattva or Buddha level. So an arhat is very accomplished and can continue to develop greater and greater states of meditative absorption, which we have talked about in the past. But these still retain the sense of achievement, of seeking a goal. And then we have finally, before I pass this off to John Tyler, without ornament. So at this point, you've accomplished a lot. You are fully present and seeing clearly. You have overcome kleshas, but you're not ready to be a teacher. He says, you have accomplished much on a personal level, but you do not manifest that to the rest of the world. Basically, without ornament means you are not ready to be a teacher. So, without ornament means you are unadorned as a teacher, because he says that you may have transcended neurotic hang-ups, but you are still unable to manifest to students, to yourself, and to the world as a highly accomplished person. And actually, in the previous section on, what was it, on incompletion, yes, he did a little summary, which I would like to just convey at this point. He said, to review, in the Hinayana, there are stream winners, once returners, non-returners, and arhats. When students first enter the path, they are called stream winners. Since stream winners and once returners emphasize meditative absorptions, or dhyanas, they remain within the realm of passion. Non-returners are able to conquer the realm of passion, but they're still working with samsaric mind and with the Hindu notion of attaining divine achievement or enlightenment. They continue to work with that until they become complete arhats, when finally they cut through the whole thing. Non-returners are incomplete because they still in the process of not returning. So at this point, I'd like to pass this off to Mr. Tyler.
Good evening. So I'm going to take up where Barry left off. Aspect number 8 of Gukpa is called adorned. And at this point, Trungpa says, you have become a teacher with confidence and flair, and your individual discipline is developed. And having overcome the veil of neurosis and the veil of karmic obligations, you have achieved power over the world. So this is a further state of development in the cessation of samsara for all of us. In aspect number 9 is called with omission. And at this stage, you have attained freedom from rebirth in the 6 realms and the realm of pure form, but are unable to accomplish real sanity completely and properly. So you're inching towards nirvana. You have not transcended the realm of the formless gods, he says. The neurosis of an abstract notion of the ultimate has not yet been completely conquered. So you're still, in your mind, you're still at a very subtle level struggling with the contrast of ultimate and emptiness. And you still maintain very subtle, he says, theistic hangups. And then he follows on and says that even arhats and bodhisattvas have these same hangups. The next stage is without omission. And he says here that you have transcended theism. He said all neuroses and habitual patterns are transcended at this point. But you are still in the Hinayanas, on the Hinayana path, and not a bodhisattva or a Buddha at this stage. You have seen the hassles of samsara or suffering, and you've seen them as being fantastically vivid and obvious, but that the hassles of nirvana are much more so. And when the hassles of nirvana are overcome, you are able to become a respectable nirvanic person, which is actually a big deal, he says. And I would expect that is true. And he sums it up by saying, this is the definition of cessation from the Hinayana point of view. You become a good citizen of Hinayana, somebody who has truly attained the state of cessation. So more clarity in your practice, less solidity in your view, an extreme reduction in participating in the kleshas. In number 11, which is entitled Especially Supreme, he says, and I think this is probably the most important aspect of it, at this level, you have transcended both samsara and nirvana. But he also makes a side comment, which is interesting. He said that this particular aspect of cessation was inserted by the Mahayanists, but he includes it because his guru included it. So nirvana means dwelling in peace and openness, and samsara means dwelling in one's neurosis. So you have transcended both at this point. And finally, in the final aspect is called beyond calculation. And he said in this case, whatever needed to be overcome has been overcome. We attain an ultimate state of peace, relaxation, openness, in which we are no longer hassled by the samsaric world. Something truly to aspire to. And he breaks this particular stage down into several groupings. One is renunciation. And he said, at this point, you don't have to try to renounce anything. You're already there, like a former addict who no longer craves. The second one is complete purification. And he says here, there are no hang-ups in reaching cessation. Everything is purified. The third is called worn out. And in this particular one, he emphasizes the idea of having worn out the subtle and the obvious neuroses, so your subtle and obvious neuroses. The next is passionlessness. And he makes the statement that Gokpa is passionless, which is also a basic definition of Dharma. Finally, the next stage he calls cessation. And he says, since there is no desire or aggression to initiate further involvement in the samsaric world, there is, in fact, cessation at this point and in this stage. And then he follows on with complete peace. He says, a different conception of peace than the theistic world has. Peace is energetic. It is an immense power and energy. Actually, that is the source of the sense of humor, which is also a definition of cessation. And finally, the last phase of this 12th stage is subsiding, is giving up hope. You're giving up altogether all the neuroses and problems of the previous 11 possibilities. I think that's a very important statement. To open yourself, to relieve yourself of that solidity that has been created all through your existence being able to do that is an amazing experience, I can imagine. So, in summary, cessation means transcending the turmoil and problems of life and the neuroses that goes along with them. That's for each of us as individuals. He says we transcend cessation itself, so there is no ground. The groundlessness itself could become a very powerful expression of cessation. And here again, he points at that basic quality of Buddhism, which is shunyata. He said we can actually achieve cessation if we have no personal involvement in it. No personal involvement in it. However, when we want to watch our own cessation, and this is very important, we are simply cranking up the wheel of samsara all over again. So having gone through, I think what he's saying is having gone through these aspects of cessation, having been able to achieve these various levels, is done in the absence of a focus on your progress or marking your card, as it were. And that if you find yourself doing that, you're going right back into the wheel of samsara once more. So he says, when we have abandoned any personal ego input, which is, I think, what he was referring to by looking at your involvement and your progress, any personal bank account, we begin to achieve proper cessation. In the long run, this could be our best investment, but it appears to be a very bad business deal because we don't have any legal contract to protect ourselves. We are no longer existing. So the sum of this cessation is a true appreciation of the concept of emptiness brought about by our practice, by our meditative practice. And that's the conclusion of chapter 58. So I'm going to go on and talk. Chapter 59 is the entry into two chapters that focus on the truth of the path, the fourth noble truth. And this is a short chapter with very pointed comments. This is I think the most important thing that I learned from reading this chapter again is that my perception of the path has been incorrect for a long, long time. And that what we really should see the path as is a set of equipment and attitudes that are given to us, but the path is not a clear road ahead. The path is a jungle that has to be cleared, and it's cleared by us when we effectively use this equipment and attitudes, which in effect are these teachings and our meditative practice. And so we have, I guess you might say in one respect that we have a survival kit and have to learn to survive and come out on the other side. And those are terms that Shogam Trungpa uses. So he said the sequence of the path has 4 marks, and the marks include impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and egolessness, not things that we haven't heard before, not terms that we haven't heard before. And in terms of impermanence, in this case, he says, impermanence, which is experiential, and overcoming the notion of eternity, which is imaginary. So again, I think he refers to that feeling of comfort and part of our entertainment and trying to solidify our life in one of those notions caught in that is the notion of eternity. The second, suffering. Because everything is impermanent, we are constantly searching for pleasure, which is painful, connected to spiritual materialism. So I think what he's saying here is that we need to learn that the very entertainment that we constantly search for as a solace for suffering is suffering in and of itself, brings on suffering in and of itself. The third is emptiness, a gap of nothingness, which produces a sense of desolation. And I think this is a a very true statement. I think this aspect of the path is one that is truly achieved when you cut the I and other out of your life, when you're able to do that. And what you find is a sense of solitude, a sense of being alone, but not in a negative sense. Not in a negative sense. And then there's egolessness. There's no one to hang on to that realization or celebrate that experience or emptiness. I think what he's saying here is we're doing this on our own. That one of the true beauties, if you will, of the Buddhist philosophy is an appreciation that when you understand your true nature, you can become comfortable with it, and you can realize that you don't need somebody else to make you feel better, or to bounce anything you experience off of. That you can absorb those experiences and experience them yourself in their full luminosity. Though we feel that there is an ongoing center, solid-ishness, there isn't. That's the experience of emptiness, that there's no solid-ishness. And dignity is not based on self and other, but comes from heaven down to earth. And the more you let go, the more dignity takes place. So the more your practice takes you to that place where you can let go, the more dignity you will experience. Then he says there are 4 qualities of the path. But before we talk about the 4, it's extremely important that we go over the fact that you have to make your own way. The path is not laid out for you. You are as the surveyor, the road crew, and the traveler all in one. It's your path. It's not a universal path. It's a path that you create for yourself as the result of your experiences in practice and in understanding the Dharma. Though you do have guidelines, altogether the nature, he says, altogether the nature of the path is more like an expedition or exploration than following the road that already has been built. So you're going to build your path as you go. You have to clear out the jungle and all the trees, underbrush, and obstacles. You have to bypass tigers and elephants and poisonous snakes. You have to make your own way. The path is designed both to clear out obstacles and to develop particular patterns and qualities. And he says in conclusion, it is very hard work. So we all need to learn to experience the hard work and to enjoy the hard work, I guess, is what he's telling us. And the rewards are immeasurable. So the aspects of the path. The path is searching for real meaning of suchness, discovering Dharma and suchness, what is really there, connected with rediscovering our own Buddha nature. It's also, there's also an element of insight, and that is through clarity and transcending neuroses. Discipline based on shamatha, as well as meditation and action, yields immense clarity of both neurosis and sanity. So I think what he's saying there is that as we strengthen our practice, as we move gradually down this path, our ability to see clearly grows. He says the sitting practice of meditation is based on shamatha discipline, which provides immense clarity and the ability to relate with situations very fully, precisely, and completely. So a neurosis becomes the spokesperson to develop further clarity. and serves two purposes: showing the path and showing its own suicidal quality. So the neurosis, under the proper set of circumstances, commits suicide. At least that's the way I see it. And so I think one of the things he's alluding to here is the appreciation of your neuroses, of being able to look at them with some clarity, using the practice as the basis. And then when that's accomplished successfully, those neurosis will dissipate. Okay. And then he talks about the idea of practice, associating with basic sanity. Practice enables us to relate with misconceptions of the Dharma, such as eternalism and nihilism. In our lives, we're trying to cope and handle all the details, keep things under control, and sometimes it seems pretty impossible. In contrast, in the sitting practice of meditation, you are becoming like a rock, like an ocean. You are just being, he says, which I think is probably one of the most important statements in this chapter. And he says, he follows that by saying there is satisfaction. This generates satisfaction, clarity, and immense dignity. Through meditation practice, you are associating yourself with basic sanity, which takes place continuously. And finally, he talks about fruition, and that is fruition as permanent nirvana, which means we have learned the lesson of neurosis and its tricks. And once we have learned this lesson, it is quite likely that we will not do the same things again. And I don't think this, as Barry said earlier, I don't think this comes as a great flash of enlightenment and all your life has changed. I think it comes incrementally through your practice. But each of those little increments is I think part of that luminosity that John talks about all the time. At this point, although we have learned our lesson, ordinary little habitual patterns are still going to pull us back over and over, but are not that problematic, he says. The kind of fruition is that we are not going to keep making large-scale mistakes, like wanting to be saved, or wanting to be blissed out, or wanting to indulge. We have learned from our mistakes, so we are not going to make the same mistakes twice. Fruition is knowing that we finally have a direction in spite of all the little freakouts taking place all the time. Another very important statement, and I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
So we can have a discussion. Thank you, John and Barry. Really good. Anyone impressed by anything in particular? Or have anything you'd like to share?
Any complaints?
Judy?
All this fine slicing of various stages seems to urge you towards judging your progress. And yet, at every turn, he says that that's a mistake. So to me, that seems a little bit paradoxical.
Yeah, that it could seem that way for sure. No, I think the idea here is that by gaining a better understanding of these stages and how things can progress and what kinds of experiences you may encounter, it is just meant to be helpful in recognizing, where you are on the path.
But you're not supposed to be particularly aware of that.
No, you can be aware, but
I think
it's
the
just not.
awareness needs to
It's
be
just it's there's a Lojong slogan which is "Don't expect applause," and that's really what this is about. You're not. It's you're never going to get anywhere on this path by really working and achieving anything. It's just that, I mean, I know my own experience, and I think we did talk about that. You can start to notice at some point that things have changed,
Yeah.
and it can be reassuring, and it can help you to develop more confidence that you're, that you're doing the good work.
without marking your card.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between awareness and the idea of consciously saying to yourself, okay, today I got to this point. By tomorrow, I want to be at this point.
Right.
And that's I think what he's saying there is that's self-defeating. That puts you right back where you started from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important not to fall into the trap of viewing this as a self-improvement project,
Right.
because that, built into that whole concept is a level of self-attack, saying that I'm not good enough as I am now.
Yeah. And the effort, uh, if you start to take it as steps that you have to achieve, then it's so that's a subtlety that um, that one has to drop. The
Yeah,
idea of it step to step to step.
yeah. I mean, for one thing, they don't always happen in that order.
Right. I noticed.
You notice?
Personally, I find it very helpful to have him pointing out what the accomplishments are, because I find them in my experience in me, and it allows me to give up a feeling of insufficiency and say, okay, yeah, I can do this. I am doing this. At the same time, reading this, it makes me more aware of my neuroses, my habitual neurotic patterns, like in the six realms. I guess the hope is that by becoming conscious of the way in which I am neurotic, I can begin to give it up. Because those neuroses are really the last strongholds of me. of ego, of
Mm.
wanting to survive. And I
Yeah.
think someone like Patrul Rinpoche, who was completely humble and, without self-centeredness or pride, and just wandered the plains of Tibet, being of help to people. So I found this chapter really beautiful, especially as it directed me toward awareness of my neuroticisms.
Mm.
Unless one is aware or I am aware of them, I just proceed to act them out, silently here in my head or, in my body, not so silently. Becoming aware of them, the way in which my ego expresses itself. Somehow it seems like there's something in that, some kind of feeling of heart, of warmth, maybe of kindness for myself to see that, and without being harsh or critical. Although, I'm not saying it's attractive. I'm not telling you right now what all these things are that came to my mind. They're actually not that many, but noticeable, neurotic patterns. And at the same time, this picture that I can very much relate to, and I think many of us can here, of resting in awareness in the present moment, of coming back into this sanity with which we were born. It's effortless. It's already there. And it contains both clarity and ease, especially at the Hinayana level. There's ease, the lack of suffering, and clarity that we can see things perhaps as they are, more. So these two aspects is what came to me through this chapter, which I found, these two chapters, which I thought were just terrific. Thank you both.
Mm.
I mean, can't each one of us begin to see our own sanity as it's described here? And also our hidden secret neuroses, egotisms.
Mm.
So yes, that's very good. So remember that the Four Noble Truths are about dealing with the essential cause of suffering, which is ego. And so as you move along the path, and that's where you are in the third and the fourth Noble Truths, it's constantly diminishing that. So whether you're criticizing yourself or applauding yourself, both of those things are attending to your ego. So as you move forward, they become less and less and less. And as they become less and less and less, then what John is describing is that then there's room for that to unfold, clarity and 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 space. And out of that automatically comes love and compassion.
Mm. Mm.
The other things that struck me in these chapters, um, or two I'd want to mention. One is it is bit by bit and step by step. That's why there are all these lists, I guess, 12 things here and 3 things here and 5 over there. That's one thing, and that's okay. That's how it works, just a little bit at a time. And the second big thing is that it's different for everybody. And so that image of going through the wilderness with a survival kit, so it's quite possible you won't tick off every box, nor do you really want to. But don't worry if you don't. It is different for everybody. It's as long as you're making this general progress, and it will happen automatically. You don't really need to do anything except somebody pull that out, John Tyler. Just be here. Just be here. What does that mean? To be fully present in the present moment. If you can just do that, then everything else will take care of itself.
Sometimes I gotta laugh because in these in the times like this and in meditation, every now and then I look and here's a screen full of people who are just sitting here silently.
Hey, you think your screen is frozen, right?
You get comfortable with silence. You get comfortable with not doing anything. I realized at some point, I would be okay with watching paint dry. And I think that's a sign of cessation.
In Vermont in the spring, people would get really excited watching the snow melt.
Just don't get attached to the paint when you're watching it dry.
Literally. Don't get attached to it, literally, huh?
Mhm.
It's interesting. I listening to this, I became very aware of my own neuroticisms, in particular, because as I listened to the description of the sanity, I thought, gee, I can do a lot of that. And then it came to me, yeah, but what about, and then I thought about a neurotic cliche that I've got that's very habitual and long standing. And I thought, well, maybe I should confess it. And then I thought, I don't want to do that. And then I remember Trooper Rinpoche used to needle me all the time. He called me Honest John. And so I'm not going to do that. Combination of not wanting the pain and remembering his criticism. And yet, I feel that in that criticism of myself, that feeling of my own neurotic egotism and the way it manifests, that there's tremendous possibility of some kind of happiness, of some kind of release from feeling alone and feeling simple, maybe. Anyhow, I throw it out to you. without being honest, John.
I would agree with that 100%. It makes me think of Franz Kafka again. So our neuroses, our egos, they just lock our hearts up like a sea of frozen ice. So yeah, if you can get rid of those neuroses and diminish your ego, you can bust free of that. You can break that ice.
Yeah, it makes me realize that where my main neurosis is, in which realm, you know, it's actually corresponds to a realm, and it's a habit, long standing. What do you
You know,
think?
I
Sarah,
think of all
Sarah
those.
hasn't said anything. I'm going to provoke Sarah. Yeah, actually.
Um, well, I guess, yeah, when you can see the habits of your neuroses, like just recently, I found out that all of these things I was acting out was because of this just like fear of being alone. And I never would have understood because they were so subtle that they had anything to do with that fear. But once I saw that, it was really, it was so freeing, um, because I could just let them go rather than let them play out and let the karma play out. And then I found that I could just kind of like feel this immense love and not like want anybody to change. I could just like rest in this feeling of love and yeah, just realizing nobody needs to change at all. And I don't know. But also, I guess, Barry, what you were talking about, us all sitting here silently, it reminded me of the retreat in Vermont when we had the silent day and we were all sitting at the table eating together. And I felt so connected and in love with everybody in a way, um, that I didn't feel any of the other days. Like it really felt like we were all just sitting in awareness, and I felt so close to everybody because we were able to do that together. So uh, that was neat. And I often find it's really hard for me to share in these groups because it's hard for me to like grasp onto a thought. I just sit here and I just really enjoy hearing everybody, and it, it's hard for me to contemplate and join in sometimes. So thanks for letting me listen.
That's terrific. I love that about eating silently and experiencing that connection. Because, like, yeah, a lot of conversation can just get in the way. You're muted, John.
There are a lot of people who haven't spoken: Darlin and Dan and Tanya and Don, Robert only a little, and Carolyn. I wonder if she's there.
Oh, Tanya has something, I think.
Ooh,
Well, I'm always so thankful for the insights and perspectives that I gain from the teachings each night that I come on Thursday. Um, Tonight, the concept of being in a samsaric jungle and creating your own path really resonated with me. I like the idea of being able to think about surrendering, giving, or opening as a way to make space or to clear my path. During meditation, I like to sit, rest, and use that opportunity to create my own path. And then in daily life, for me, the classroom is definitely the samsaric jungle, not just my own samsaric jungle, but the people around me. And I really use all of the tools and the insights once again to help me get through my classroom, my samsaric jungle, for the fact that I teach in middle school, urban, and there are so many kids that have needs, need help, bring trauma, all kinds of stuff around me. And there's just not enough support, not enough teachers. So the teachings are very helpful. Thank you.
thank you. Darlin, absolutely.
I, I feel like I say this so much, but I'm absorbing all this information. And that's great teaching. So I don't really have anything to say. It's just all kind of percolating in there, I guess.
Okay.
Yep. Well, I'll take this opportunity to say, yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you, John and Barry and everyone. Um, but when Sarah was just talking about that, how she felt at the when we had the silent day or silent meal, that I often have that reaction when we're quiet, like a lot of us are quiet. And John Baker asks if that's a conversation stopper. And I feel the opposite when he asks that. Not that it's the you know, not that it's the wrong question at all, but to me it it's a verbal, it's a verbal stopper. But I am what I'm experiencing, during those times, and I was just experiencing now, was exactly what, or similar to what Sarah was describing about the feeling of sitting there silently with people. I just feel really, those times when we're all silent, including just now, I just feel that sense of connection is just so strong. It's just really strong and just feels really present. And I think sometimes I don't say things because I just don't want to interrupt the presence that I feel. I don't want to, it's just simple presence, that I'm feeling. And it's, you know, it's not a you know, it's not so much that it's a conversation stopper. To me, it's more of a getting lost stopper. I feel right here during those times, you know. It just, the connection and just the nowness and 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 definitely the love, And it's kind of this kind of love that is just feels like a connection, and it's not, it's not specific towards any, one person. It's really just a love of the Sangha and just a love of what the connection in this Sangha feels like in terms of the times I can feel it all the time, which I get glimpses of, you know. So And that, well, that's it.
Yeah, well said.
Well, I'll say it a lot less articulately than Dan just did, but I think of these meetings is the analogy I use is it's like a fireplace. You know, when you come around, you sit around a bonfire, you sit down and you warm your hands. And when people sit around a comfortable fire, they tend to get silent. And so I think of the group as a big Dharma bonfire. You know, you just sit down by the warmth. And when I'm in these sessions, I don't feel the need to talk as much, think as much, worry as much. And so it's that, I think someone else said this, you don't want to interrupt, you don't grab onto the fire, you just sit and enjoy it for what it is. And so I see this as sort of the log that burns the wisdom. So being in these groups, it's meaning for me. And that's the analogy I use when I'm sitting here in comfortable silence.
Hi, Carolyn made it.
She had to overcome many obstacles along that path.
Okay, I'm here. What Robert said about the warmth of the fireplace. Oh, yes, I'm going to cry in happiness. Oh, yes.
Well, it's time. Should we do the closing chants? Sarah, do you want to lead us?
Yeah, thanks. We will close with a prayer for peace, and then by dedicating the merit generated by our discussion and practice tonight for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Great
John,
evening.
Mary,
John.
each of
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Good
Have a great
night.
night.
And
I
John and Barry especially.
Thank you, John and Barry,
May you burn well.
and Sarah.
Looking forward to listening to this. Add them in.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good night all.
Nighty night.